The modern world can use AI to paint pictures in seconds, and satellites to see every square meter of Earth clearly. But there's one incredibly paradoxical thing. The entire global economy still revolves around something that existed hundreds of years ago. A wooden barrel. Sounds absurd, right? Every day the price of oil is quoted in dollars per barrel, but you'll never see that barrel at any oil field. So how many liters is one barrel of oil, really? And why can it send the entire world into chaos? To understand why the world uses the unit barrel, we have to travel back in time to the 1850s, in the region of Pennsylvania, USA. Imagine a scene of unprecedented chaos. Back then, a man named Edwin Drake drilled into an underground oil spring for the very first time. Crude oil gushed upward, black, thick, and viscous. The entire region erupted in a fever. People rushed to dig everywhere, hoping to change their lives with black gold. But with great opportunity came great trouble. Back then, there were no transcontinental pipelines, no massive tanker trucks, no gleaming steel storage tanks like today. Oil spilled everywhere, soaking into the ground and flowing into rivers and streams. People frantically searched for anything that could hold this precious liquid so they could sell it. And the most common containers on the American frontier at the time were wooden barrels. Barrels for beer, barrels for salted fish, barrels for molasses, and most abundantly and cheaply, barrels for whiskey. Imagine a scene both tragic and comic. Grubby miners, faces black with grime and smeared in oil, lugging barrels once meant to hold fine premium spirits, to scoop up crude oil. But the real trouble started here. Because they were repurposing all kinds of old barrels, no two were the same size. Fish barrels were usually short and squat. Molasses barrels bulged in the middle. When trading, arguments broke out constantly, buyers claiming the barrel was only half full, sellers insisting it was topped off. By 1866, oil producers in western Pennsylvania realized that if everyone kept using their own measurements, no one could do business properly. They sat down together in a town called Titusville and signed a historic agreement. A standard barrel of oil would hold 42 gallons. Many of you might wonder, why not 40 or 50 gallons, a rounder number, instead of that odd figure of 42? In truth, it was an extremely practical calculation by the manual laborers of the time. A wooden barrel holding about 40 gallons of oil was just heavy enough that two strong men could roll, push, or hoist it onto a horse-drawn cart without breaking their backs. But they added 2 extra gallons as what they called a loss allowance. Just imagine, American roads back then were nothing but mud and potholes, horse carts rattled and bounced violently, and a wooden barrel was never perfectly airtight. Oil would seep through the gaps in the wood or evaporate under the blazing sun. So selling 42 gallons while the customer actually received around 40 was considered a fair deal for both sides. This 42-gallon standard proved so durable that when the oil tycoon Rockefeller built his Standard Oil empire, he turned it into the mandatory standard for the entire world, and so the unit barrel officially entered history. Now let's shift from history to a bit of math to make the numbers more concrete. If you measure by modern international standards, the equation looks like this. 1 standard barrel of oil equals exactly 42 U.S. gallons. Each U.S. gallon is approximately 3.785 liters. Multiply it out, and 1 standard barrel of oil contains 158.987 liters. For ease of memory and practical use, the world rounds this to say that 1 barrel of crude oil equals 159 liters. But here's the thing, that figure of 159 liters actually contains a kind of magic. Never assume that if you pour 159 liters of crude oil into a refinery, you get exactly 159 liters of finished product out the other side. It's not that simple. Thanks to modern chemical technology, after a process of distillation and cracking the molecules apart, the total volume of products yielded from one 159-liter barrel of crude oil actually expands to around 170 liters. This is called the processing gain of oil. From those 159 liters of dark, raw crude through the hands of skilled engineers, it transforms into about 70 liters of gasoline, about 40 liters of diesel. The remainder becomes jet fuel, kerosene, asphalt, and countless other products. When you think about it, crude oil is like a bottomless jar of honey, as long as you have the technology to process it. Now we get to the most sensitive part, money. If you ask what the price of oil is today, honestly, we'd have to glance at a ticker board immediately because it moves faster than gold prices. Typically, global oil prices fluctuate between $70 and $90 USD per barrel. Let's use $80 USD as our reference point for comparison. In the United States, this is the world's most active oil market. The signature American crude is WTI, West Texas Intermediate. Very light and sweet, low in sulfur. making it extremely easy to refine into gasoline. At $80 USD per barrel divided by 159 liters, you'll find that 1 liter of crude oil costs only about $0.50 USD. Meanwhile, retail gasoline prices at U.S. pumps currently range from about $3.00 to $400 USD per gallon, roughly $0.80 to $1 USD per liter, so crude oil is considerably cheaper than refined gasoline. In Canada is an oil giant, especially with the oil sands in Alberta. However, Canadian crude, commonly called Western Canadian Select, or WCS, is typically heavier and more difficult to refine than WTI, so it always sells at a lower price, usually $10–20 USD less per barrel than WTI. If WTI is at $80 USD, Canadian crude might be only $60–70 USD. For Canadians, that crude price works out to roughly $60–70 CAD per liter. In Australia is heavily dependent on importing refined petroleum products. The oil price Australians reference is usually Brent crude from the North Sea or Tapis crude from the Asian region. At $80 USD per barrel, converted to Australian dollars, AUD, 1 barrel would cost around $120 AUD. Breaking that down, 1 liter of crude in Australia costs about $0.75 AUD. However, due to long shipping distances and taxes, retail gasoline prices in cities like Sydney or Melbourne typically range from $1.80 AUD to over $2 AUD per liter. No matter where you are, you'll notice one interesting truth. 1 liter of crude oil is often cheaper than a cup of coffee or a brand-name bottle of water in a big city. Why does the price of this imaginary wooden barrel matter so much? Because oil is the blood of the economy. When the price per barrel rises by $10, it's not just oil tycoons getting richer, it sets off a terrifying domino effect. Rising oil prices drive up transportation costs, logistics. Higher logistics costs push up the price of food at the supermarket. The cost of chemical fertilizers for farmers rises too, and in the end, both your wallet and mine get thinner. On the flip side, there are times when oil prices collapse catastrophically, like in 2020 when the pandemic hit. The world ground to a halt. Planes sat idle on tarmacs, and oil prices actually fell into negative territory. Sellers had to pay buyers to take the oil away, because storage facilities were completely full. Those were the moments that showed us just how powerful and surreal this barrel of oil truly is. This is the part that might shatter some illusions. That 159-liter wooden or steel barrel you've been picturing in modern industrial reality barely exists at all. If you visit drilling platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, USA, the Alberta region, Canada, or offshore oil fields in Australia, you won't see a single barrel anywhere. Instead, you'll find a labyrinth of enormous pipelines and storage tanks as tall as 10-story buildings that can hold millions of liters. Oil is pumped directly from the ground through processing systems and straight into massive tankers as long as several football fields. So today, the barrel is really nothing more than a unit of account on paper. It is the common language that allows people in New York, London, or Sydney to understand each other when closing a million-dollar deal. Even oil storage has become almost unbelievably sophisticated. In the United States, they have incredibly strategic reserves, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPR. They don't use surface tanks because they're too expensive and pose fire and explosion risks. Instead, they turn to enormous natural salt caverns lying hundreds of meters underground in Texas and Louisiana. Water is pumped in to dissolve the salt, creating vast hollow chambers, and then oil is pumped in for storage. Down there, the pressure and temperature are extremely stable, and the oil can be stored for decades without degrading. To close today's story, take a look around the room you're in right now. Your phone case, your toothbrush, your water bottle, the t-shirt you're wearing, all of it emerged from that 159-liter barrel of crude oil. Oil isn't just for fueling vehicles, it is a raw material for the petrochemical industry, the industry that creates nearly everything in modern life. Without that black barrel of oil, we would have no plastics, no paint, no fertilizers, and not even the medicine we take or the cosmetics we use. So the next time you hear news about rising oil prices, don't just worry about filling up your gas tank. Worry about your toothbrush and your electricity bill, too. The oil barrel, a vessel that was borrowed by chance from a whiskey distillery, has become the measuring stick for the prosperity of nations. It can build glittering cities, but it can also ignite devastating wars. I hope today's video helped you better understand this powerful character known as the oil barrel. If you found it interesting, please hit like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, goodbye and see you again.